me, it's Deidre, and welcome to InPHormation with Deidre. And I'm Deidre Sully, your resident public health professional. So today is going to be a really interesting day. It is May, and not only is May also, used to recognize mothers and maternal health, but May is also Mental Health Awareness Month. You might say, well, why do we need a whole month? Well, why not? Sometimes we really need to be reminded of those moments when we have to take care of ourselves and initiate self-care. Dare I say it, radical self-care, right? We need to make sure that we're having those spaces where we, kind of quiet and take time out to pay attention to what's going on up here. Because stress, which we'll get into today, is a real thing, and it can actually change the way that you function. Because your body will always be in a state of like repair, because your repair mechanisms will set in. So I wanted, as I said, like stress is going to be the focus of our talks. And so today we're going to actually focus on a particular area of stress, because the whole theme is what is stressing us out. So today we're going to focus on the what is the police. And the reason is because it has been such say trending, but it unfortunately has become a trend to, seeing on the news melanin rich people just dying by the dozens. Just in the last several weeks, we've seen so many people get, cut down by law enforcement. And one of them that was really popular, he did make it away with his life, but the altercation and the interaction was just unnecessary. So the amount of stress like caused from that situation, what does it do to a person? So that's what we'll be looking at. So today, the what is stressing us is the police are stressing us out, y'all. And again, like, we just came off of a crazy year. It is May. We're almost halfway through 2021. We're still dealing with COVID. We're still seeing Black men and women cut down by the police. These things have just have not ended. And in my line of work, is public health. So we really look at policing as a public health issue. And really, that stress factor has a lot to do with it. So there's a tremendous amount of stress that comes from, number one, the aftermath. We're in an age where the advent of social media has really brought all of these things to the forefront. The attacks from law enforcement with regards to melanin-rich people has been happening for centuries. I'm going to say it again. It has been happening for centuries. This is not new news. What is new-ish is the rate and proliferation with which we're able to see it in action because of cell phones and people recording incidents. So this is why, and I'm sure we all know that by now. But so that's why I wanted to focus on like what happens, with all the intake of that. There is not only the physical, for the persons who are involved in these incidents, the physical violence and the stress that comes from that physical violence, but what about that psychological violence, And the policing has been used for many, many years, centuries, as I said, to inflict both physical and psychological violence on melanin-rich people, Black people, and Black communities. So, like I said, part of that is the aftermath. It's the stress that we experience from the aftermath. There's also, because I want to make sure that we're looking at all areas, right? There's also the stress from living in neighborhoods that are, maybe not the safest. And so the lack of trust that the residents have with law enforcement or the police to be able to even protect them. Are you going to, be unbiased when you are called regarding a particular issue? Are you going to come? A lot of people, are really, kind of wondering like if the law enforcement is going to come at all. And that's what a lot of people deal with. Before I go on, I just want to say peace to everyone in the chat. Peace, Sovereignties. Peace, Brother Antonio. These are all my new people. Peace, Echot Kashia. So as I was saying, like we're talking about stress. So yeah, the aftermath, the are you even going to come? And then thinking about part of that aftermath is like the death toll, right? We like as we hear about each new name each week, and also they're getting younger and younger. We hear about each new name. So far in 2021, there have been over 300 police killings. And that's about par for the course, is an average of 300 per quarter. We're in May, so maybe like if we average it out, if it's average of 300 per quarter, 52 have been killed for quarter two, because we're in quarter two of 2021. That's not okay. And then when we look back, like the numbers for 2020, 28% of the police killings were people of color, melanin rich people, specifically Black people. But for a population that is only 13% of the larger population, 28% is a lot. We're dying at more rates than we actually take up with the population. No bueno. It's not good. So, yeah, I wanted to just like go in on some of those things. So as some of you are coming in and like viewing the chat, I am inviting some of you to come in and share some of your stories. So I'm going to give everyone, if you're brave enough to share the space with me, 2 minutes to share your story on how policing has, really affected your stress levels, or and personally. So you have a personal story about how policing has affected your stress levels, whether it be you that was involved or an immediate friend or family member. Or you can just share your thoughts on the policing as a public health issue and policing stressing folks out, like in general. So 2 minutes, no matter what it is, you got 2 minutes. So yeah, so as we wait for people to come on, just to give a little bit more information, I wanted to tell a story because I also have a podcast, and that's True Health Live. And on the podcast, we actually are going to get into policing as a public health issue. So I'll give you like a little bit of a preview as we're talking about, if we're talking about the stress levels. And one of the things that is really key about stress levels, because it has to like make you sit and think. It thinks like, what is the attack on the Black family, on the melanin rich family? What is the attack? Almost, not even almost, to the point where I was having a conversation with one of my podcast co-hosts, and she actually was sharing, it actually made her and her mate really think about bringing children into the world. So that is really deep, that, when you are so oppressed and really kind of bogged down with stress, and that we have to think in those terms. Do I want to bring another life into this realm? Because if I do, I run the risk of that person losing their lives. And at this point, it doesn't even matter how old they are. It also doesn't even matter where we are, because we've seen from many of the victims in the recent past, both a few weeks ago and last week, it doesn't even matter. We don't even have to it's not even about sometimes where you physically are, what neighborhood you're in. You can be in your house, as we know. You don't even have to be awake. You can be sleeping in your bed. So what does that do to the psyche of not only the people that experience that firsthand, if they survive, or their family members, but what does that do to the community at large? It just creates this ripple effect of stress, because then there's what happens, the marches. That's, a serotonin and adrenaline, your stress responders coming in to, address a certain issue. And then what happens if you're living in this perpetual state of stress? It becomes a generational curse, and it's just perpetuated, right? So we have to really think about, how do we, kind of sit with this, and how do we change that? Of course, a lot of people are calling for, there definitely needs to be reform. And until that happens, because those things, it's taking a long time. And we know that there was time to do these things. At this point, again, centuries. Why are we still asking for the same thing? Freedom has to be taken. So we have to sit and think, what do we do for ourselves to minimize that stress? Greetings and peace, Precious Stephanie. How are you? So just in case you did not hear, if you joined the live a little late, we are bringing on guests to share their thoughts live. So you can click the link down in the description box, or copy and paste it into your URL, so that you can join the live stream, and I can bring you up on live, and you can do one of two things. You will have 2 minutes to share your personal story on how policing has personally affected your stress levels, whether an incident happened to you or someone very close to you, or you can share your general thoughts on policing and public health and how that has affected communities in general. So you'll get 2 minutes for each. So just to like keep it moving, I will actually share a story of mine that I have. If you want to hear more about the podcast story, you got to tune in. So it'll be coming up this month while we're talking about stress levels and mental health. So take a look at what we have up currently. So you can go to www.deidresully.com and you can find the True Health Live podcast there. Or if you have your preference for your podcast listening stations, we are on all major stations: iTunes, Pandora, Spotify, Amazon, Burberry, Deezer, Stitcher. We there. So go find us, True Health Live, and take a listen. So back to the story. And this is an example of why it's really stressful, because those interactions, even if you escape with your life, it changes you, right? So this was some years ago. I was speaking with a relative of mine, and he was telling me how he was walking up the street and the police kind of came up behind him and pulled him over. Now, to give you a little context of the story, he actually was walking up the street where the hospital was. We won't even get into where it was, but he was walking to the hospital for an appointment because he actually was in follow-up appointments from a bout of cancer. So that means that he also had a cane because of the type of cancer he had. In his recovery, he was, working with a cane, and he's an older gentleman as well, like grandfather old. So he's walking up the street, and I'll say, because nowadays you can be grandparents and be really young, so I'll say 70s. And he's walking up the street with his cane, and the police stopped him and said, well, do you have ID? You fit the description of someone who just made a call. Someone made a call of someone who just mugged them, and you fit the description. Do you have ID? And then also simultaneously, another car proceeded to roll up, and it had the complainant, I don't know, the whatever, in the car, and she happened to be an older white woman. And they asked her to identify him on the spot. What if she had said, yes, that was him? Mind you, he was going into the doctor's appointment because he is, again, recovering from cancer. He's walking with a cane. This is not like the comic books and superhero movies. I don't know that. Maybe people do that. I saw a news report of somebody doing some insane things, but let's be real. Does he have time to, switch off all his clothes and then just pretend to be an old man walking up the street? And so it's like, I always sit and think, what if she had said yes? Because we also, kind of live with that other people thinking like, oh, well, you all look alike, which is also not cool. So, that actually was like really, and this person was really close to me. It was a relative. So, and I won't say what level, but it was really, really disheartening. And it was something that changed me. And I was like really angry afterwards. So what did that do to me? How did my body respond to that and being stressed from having to hear what a family member, a blood relative, had to go through in that instance? How am I processing what he was probably thinking? Like, how does he feel? And how I have to kind of look at him, experience this. And that's just one story. There are so many. And I'm just one person. So again, please feel free to come on and share any of your stories. So yeah, I just wanted to give a little bit of that. As I said, there's that aftermath, and we're always seeing this aftermath of what happens after someone is needlessly gunned down by police officers. So do any of you, Maksha, Sovereign Eves, Brother Antonio, Kashia, Aquia, Precious, if you have any stories that you want to share, you are more than welcome to come up and invite. You're invited to come up and share. Also, if you are not in the chat, you are still able to come up. Again, the StreamYard link is down at the bottom. And if there aren't any stories, that's totally okay. You can definitely put your comments in the comment section, and I will be sure to follow up with you later and comment. Or if any of you have any questions, because I can see, like, if you have questions, that's fine to ask. But it would be very nice if you pull up your questions live and we can have a little bit of a chat about it. So, and if you're having trouble with the link, please let me know in the chat, and I can see if we can like rectify that situation. So anyway, back to the stress. Yes, the police are stressing us out. All of this information, like this onboarding of information through news, through our cell phones, through our tablets, through our laptops, the social media, everything, like kind of replaying all these events over and over and over again. I don't know about you, but I think I watched a video with the officer, the military officer, and that situation at the gas station at least 3 times, and taking it and analyzing and scrutinizing it. It's really stressful. Like, what am I actually taking on into my own body? As I said, like when our body responds to stress, which will naturally happen, it can affect the immune system because that's what helps to respond to that stress, right? And so what happens is if the immune system is like overly activated, then it could, potentially have issues with brain function. So again, this is the reason why we have to look at things and kind of observe time, like Mental Health Awareness Month, check in with ourselves. How are we dealing with the stress? And that's another thing. What are the ways that people cope with stress? Cigarettes, marijuana, alcohol, illicit substances, like all of the above. And there's other things that are that happen that also manifest depression, just sadness. Some people lash out at other people. There's just so many things that happen when it comes to how people deal with stress. And if it goes on for too long, it's never good. So we definitely have to make sure that as we're kind of being bombarded, and I heard that word recently, as we're kind of being bombarded with all this imagery, right, of police violence against melanated people, we have to maybe take some time and check in with ourselves. It is very difficult to watch these things, but we have to make sure that we're taking time to check in with ourselves. And also, if we're going to watch them, also be able to learn that context is also needed in everything, because a lot of times things are shared specifically to invoke a certain reaction in people, right? And so we want to make sure that we are being mindful of those things as well, and not kind of getting stuck in those pitfalls. So Antonio Smith says, I fit the description before. I fit the description before, got cuffed and put in a car, even though they were only going off a vague description. Right. You know what I saw recently? This is insane. So that's why I had to take back, like, this is not the movies, because let me tell you, I recently saw a news report, and I honestly don't remember how long ago it was, but maybe I'll find it and put it in the description box, where this man was robbing banks. And everybody said it was a Black man, a melanated man. And even the alleged perpetrator's own mother, when everybody, they said the police and investigators were getting all these phone calls about, oh, the person, we know who did it, he lives here, and da 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 da. So they went there, and the person's mother answered the door, and she said, I know why you're here. It is my son, because they're looking at the description, they're looking at the photo, they're looking at the stills from the camera images from the bank photo, the bank camera feed. And then they get a call from another woman somewhere else across town or in another city, and she says, you have the wrong person, it was my boyfriend. And when they pick up the boyfriend, he's a whole white man. He was using a mask, one of those like movie grade, like, Hollywood studio film grade mask that was the image of a Black man. And what he did was to cover the eyes, because those masks also need to be used, like anytime it's like a prosthetic mask, you have to use makeup and things to like really seal the deal with the look. So his eyes were kind of sticking out, so he used sunglasses to cover his blue eyes, and like whatever the actual fair skin that was kind of sticking out. And he was convicted and caught. But imagine that, vague description, and it wasn't even a vague description, but it shows how people, can be mistaken. But look how, like, there's not even like a question to how people, you know, really think and scrutinize. Well, was it that person? Did I really see what I thought I saw? And I know a lot of times I like to say, like, we have to like trust our eyes, like, because some people can be like, well, who are you going to believe, me or your own eyes? And a situation like that, off of descriptions, it's like one of those outliers, those one-offs. But many times, it is the vague description that gets, and that's exactly what happened with my dad. It was a vague description. And so I was like, what if she said yes? Because she really didn't see what she thought she saw. Antonio also says the video that Chief had posted to his channel of the police basically kidnapping a very young melanated girl as she screamed for her parents really got to me too. Right. And they don't care. That's the whole, thing about like even wanting to call the police when something happens, because of the way that they react and handle the situation. It's very aggressive, and this is not all. So I want to be clear and say not all. However, in some cases we have to generalize because it is a systemic problem. So this is where we get into, like, this is an issue. It is an issue of a schism, we'll say it that way. It is an issue of racism that is institutionalized, right? Because the police are an institution. So, some people say systemic, some people say structural. I say institutional. It's institutional racism. I realized, so Kashia says, I realized the other day how I naturally tense up when driving around the police, how anxious I become. Same thing. And I'm always doing the, like, check the mirror, like checking the mirror, like to see. And it's like, did I do anything wrong? No, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because that's also happened to my mom before. They pulled her over and there was nothing happening. They'll make up an excuse, like, and we've seen these things. And again, just because there are some people who are, not moving from that direction, but these things happen. And again, it just creates more and more stress. It's just built off. Think about how tense you get when you are driving. What is that doing to your psyche? What is the response, the physical response that your body is having? Made me realize how seriously we need our own communities, right? And as a public health person, I've become really big on like community health, because it's really important to know who your community is, know that you're sharing the same culture, so that when you are receiving just ice or even-handedness, that you know where it's coming from, and that the people who are dealing with you in an even-handed way. They're not just handing you ice. It's not just ice, right? Yes, I could not even finish watching the video. It's not all, but it's enough. And so I also wanted to like talk about another piece of information. We think about, and this is not to sound like one of the most recent commander-in-chiefs, but there's stress on both sides, right? He likes to talk about what's happening on both sides, but there's stress on both sides, right? And so the reason why I want to bring this up, because I thought it was interesting. We know that in a profession like law enforcement, yeah, there's going to be stress, right? Because of the things that are dealt with, right? So how are they releasing that stress? And I'm sure that there are, all sorts of programs and things that they provide for policy officers to de-stress. Do we know how often they're using them? Do we know how successful they are? What's the success rate they have, right? How successful they are. How are they actually utilizing their time and space to release stress? So I'm going to tell you about this story. It's actually a recent story. So there was this violent extremist group out in Southern California, and they had like a very large social media following, with people all over the country. And we're not going to say which channel, and I'm not going to say which group, because we're not going to speak any life into them. We're not going to awaken any spirits. So So they had members from all around. So one particular member, and of course they were being investigated by the federal government because of different comments and threats that were made online, and the threats of and the people they were threatening to, you know, do harm to the protesters that were out in the streets. They were planning on doing harm just to melanated people in general, and also melanated people who are politicians. And so when that happened, that made it a federal issue, and the feds got involved, and there was a whole federal investigation. So throughout this federal investigation, um, when they were reviewing phone records and text records and things like that, they actually recognized, I don't know, this is interesting because I'm like, well, how did you recognize one voice? But I imagine maybe this person said their name. So they recognized a sheriff's deputy who was actually out of Georgia, boasting online, you know, just throwing around racial slurs like it was nobody's business about how he thought. And we can say freedom of speech, whatever, okay, right? But we have to think, well, if you're a sheriff's deputy, how can we really be sure that you are being even-handed with the people that you have been charged and took an oath to protect and serve? What they also found was different text messages. And one of the things that he was really big on, and he got convicted about, like, for other things because he had like unregistered weapons and things like that. Like he was part of, like, probably part of a mini militia, and he was saying things like, you know, he's going to arrest as many melanated people as he can so that they and charge them with felonies so that he can take away their right to vote, because we know if you have felonies you can't vote, and things like that. But one thing that really stuck out to me is when he was boasting about an arrest that he made, where he boasted how he, you know, really put a beating on the man who was melanin rich, that he did, and he said, oh, it was sweet release. So that made me think, so, you know, he's just one person and it can definitely be anecdotal. But let's just we this is my space. So we're just going to talk about it how it is. He's not the only one with that kind of mindset. He said it was sweet release. So that's just one example. That's one person that we know of. But how many is he of? How he represents how many in all these, you know, cities, counties, states across this land that we call the United States? How many are others are having that same thought? They're doing that same thing. They're releasing onto people. So clearly there is a disconnect with whatever services, psych services, and evaluations that policy officers are getting. This was very recent. So I'll go to the chat. Sovereignty says she can't get on right. That's okay. She recalls a male relative being pulled over in Brooklyn late at night. This happened at the height of the Michael Brown shooting. They approached the car, inspecting the back seat, asking for the driver to get out. One approached hand on gun. The other approached flashlight beamed into my relative's face. No real reason was given for the incident. Yeah. So what did that do to you? What did that do to your relative? What did that do to whoever else was in the car? I'm not sure if you said anybody else was in the car. If someone else was in the car, you know, how did that affect when we think of the gentleman who was shot he wasn't even driving, the passenger seat. This was several years ago. You know, he wasn't even driving. There was a child in the back seat. What has that now done to that child? What has that done to his mate that he left behind? And so this stress, and then we hold on to it. And then the other thing we hold on to is like when we're seeing again the aftermath and nothing happens. Yeah, we see recently the most recent court case that was splayed across the media. The former officer was convicted, but has any real policy been made? There are definitely policies on the table that have been introduced, but nobody's moving on them. So what kind of stress does that leave? So yeah, like there's you know, all this celebration for a conviction, but nothing has been done to address the institutional issues that are there. You know, whatever you want to, the structural issues, the systemic issues that are there. Nothing has been done because what we're seeing is a byproduct of these systemic and structural and institutional issues. She says that's a culture right there for many. It is, you know, people, you know, like that And I think you're referring to like maybe the violence and the unleashing on people. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Um, Sabrini says, well, typically this occurs with the male drivers. They are the target, unfortunately, right? He always spoke about anxiety when driving near policing agents or on long, dark highways. Isn't that a kicker? You know, and I don't drive at night anymore. Not because of that, but I don't drive at night anymore. But you don't even need to drive at night. You know, it can be broad, like I said, it can be broad daylight. You could be in your house. I remember I used to say, you know, melanated people are made to feel stressed, especially men, made to feel stressed from the moment they walk out of the house. You don't even need to leave your house anymore, you know? And even speaking of the dark highways, it takes me back like the memory of the officer, the military officer. The reason why he was driving, and they claimed that he took them on a chase. But the reason why he was driving is because he needed to get to a lit area. Why? Because he knows the statistic of if he's in a dark area, they can't see how his hands are moving. His dog is in the background. And so he's dealing with people who already also are high strung and high anxiety that is not being dealt with because they're just unleashing it on people. So we have this cesspool of stress-ridden individuals. Everybody's stressed, and there's not really real action and real addressing the stress that is developing after these incidences. So I wanted to just make sure that we kind of talk about these things. Yeah, the police are stressing us out. So what do we have to do now? Like, how do we step back and take some time for ourselves and think about how to address the stress and anxiety that comes from those? How do we make sure that we're not compromising ourselves physically? So some of that is breathing, meditate. Right now also some we know that our new brothers and sisters, and also we're sharing this time with our Muslim brothers and sisters. It is the month of Ramadan. These are the times where we have to kind of sit and take stock of what is happening in and around us so that we can center ourselves and kind of remind ourselves, in the directions that we're supposed to be, remind ourselves of our purpose, or to get centered, to actually focus on our purpose and not, and try our best not to get sidetracked by what's happening. So with that, that's on what that is our InPHormation with Deidre live for what is stressing us out, and the police are stressing us out. And I'll read the final comments. The trigger for my relative was being pulled over at night. This is a post-trauma response. So then what happens? So this is, again, when we talk about stress and trauma, like, these things are in the DSM-5, right? So this is where mental disorders are diagnosed, and post-traumatic stress is one of them. And that is actually one of the criteria for post-traumatic stress. And it's that, sometimes that trauma response is actually avoiding. So I wonder, does he now avoid driving at night? So what happens is an individual who has experienced a traumatic incident. And so post that traumatic incident, post-traumatic stress, what will happen is they will avoid and try to stay away from all stimuli that even remotely pushes them toward remembering that incident or anything remotely like that. And that is a post-traumatic stress response. So these are the things that we really have to take stock of and take note of. And so, yes. So what's stressing us out? The police. And so if that's happening, we need to take time, turn off the TV, turn off the phone, center yourselves. Do some mental exercises, self-care. Do something for self that does not focus on all of the noise that's happening around, because it'll be there when you're done. So we have to learn how to, put on those filters, right? So that's all we have for today. Give thanks for all of you who participated. And so what we'll be doing, we'll be having these lives a lot more, and I'll be inviting people up to come share the space. So thank you for joining. Peace, everyone. Bye. Oh, you know what? One last thing. I would say catch the podcast. Hopefully that wasn't too much of a space. I would say catch the podcast. And also, we're going to be back next week where we'll be talking about what stresses us out, our jobs. So now that everybody has a heads up, Make sure you come with some stories, jobs and work stressing us out. Okay, peace for real this time.